All right, so welcome back, grade 9s. We are beginning chapter 7, as you can see here in our Google Classroom. Today we're going to be working with the online document, and by the end of the day, we should have a greater understanding of the concept of consumerism. So if you click on this, if you're at home, you'd end up here, and this is where we're going to get started. Now, to get started today, we do have a quote, and I thought, what better way to start a new chapter than to look at a quote about the main topic. So consumerism. We can assume that if a consumer means someone who is buying products, Mrs. Russell brought it for you, so you can thank her next time you see her. A consumer is someone who buys goods and services. We are all in here consumers. Maybe at lunch you consumed some things that you purchased from Circle K, or maybe some things that you brought from home. In science, you learn about consumers in the ecosystem. But this chapter is going to talk about us being a part of a marketplace. Last chapter we looked at economics, and we looked at it as a macro sense, as a national sense. And now we're looking at microeconomics. We're saying, let's look at economics from an individual standpoint, from the standpoint of a consumer. So we're going to look at consumerism. Maybe you're sitting there missing the trips that you used to have to the mall and stuff like that. Maybe since March you haven't really been out to malls as much. But definitely that whole idea of going through a mall and going window shopping, and then window shopping becomes purchasing stuff, and then you're carrying lots of bags around. That's consumerism, right? This idea that to some extent we try to find joy through the products that we buy. Here's a quote to get us started. Advertising tries to stimulate our senses, our sensuous desires, converting luxuries into necessities. But it only intensifies man's inner misery. The business world is bent on creating hungers, which its wares never satisfy, and thus it adds to the frustrations and broken minds of our times. There's a pretty clear tone to that quote. So let's begin by breaking down the quote. Is this quote reflecting or rejecting consumerism? So if it's reflecting consumerism, it's saying consumerism is great. It's a good thing. That it makes us happy, it fulfills our needs, that through consumerism, many people find purpose in life. So we're driven to have a job so we can consume goods and services. Or is it saying it's negative? And if it's saying it's positive or negative, what language within the source would you say, when he says this, that's how I know it's positive or negative? So let's begin this unit on consumerism by dissecting this source. Now within the source, there's language that will show us a perspective, that this person either likes it or dislikes consumerism. So, is there language there that kind of announces it for you? That says, oh, when this person says this, I'm pretty sure this person likes it or dislikes it. So let me read it one more time, now that we know why we're reading it. So we're reading it to try to find a tone, to try to see if he likes consumerism or not. Advertising tries to stimulate our sensuous desires, converting luxuries into necessities. But it only intensifies man's inner misery. The business world is bent on creating hungers, which its wares never satisfy, and thus it adds to the frustrations and broken minds of our times. Does this person like consumerism? And if you're gonna, I see some of you shaking your head like, no, this person does not like consumerism. And you'd be right. What's the line in here that really shouts out, man, this person really doesn't like consumerism? So what's the line that, for you, or what is the phrase for you that really announces this person's position? This person is suggesting consumerism is doing what to us? Yeah? It's intensifying our misery. So misery is a bad thing. Most people want to avoid misery. And what is it doing? It's intensifying it. It's making more misery. So that helps us find the ideological perspective. That the ideological perspective, the point of view of this source, is anti-consumerism. Because according to the source, it intensifies our misery. Absolutely. The source even goes as far as explaining how it does that. So we often look at the first world Canadian lifestyle. You're driving around in your car, you'd be walking on the side of the road, somebody drives by, you're stopped at a light, you're in a BMW, they're in a Mercedes, they're in an Audi, they're in a very nice car, and they're unhappy. So there's something in that first sentence that explains how they intensify our misery. What have corporations done? Through advertising. Advertising tries to stimulate our sensuous desires, converting luxuries into necessities, but it only intensifies man's inner misery. So through advertising, these corporations, they're taking something that should be seen as a luxury and they're presenting it as a necessity. What does it mean if there's a necessity that's lacking in your life? It means your life's not complete. That without the necessities, your life is incomplete. So what are the true necessities of life? Clean air, water, shelter, some clothing to protect you from the elements. These are necessities. That if you look at a hierarchy of needs, they're at the bottom. I don't see an Audi, I don't see a Tesla, an Apple Watch, the iPhone 12. I don't see them as necessities, listed under necessities. But yet through advertising, corporations, they sell them, they present them to us as, no, this is a necessity. That your life's incomplete if you don't have this. Can you think of an ad that after you watch the ad, it really created a want and a need within you? Can you remember seeing an ad and after the ad you're like, oh man, I gotta get that. I need to get that. I want to get that, but I also need to get that. That my life is now incomplete because I don't have that. So I grew up in a very, very poor family. And when we had TV, because we didn't always have TV, but when we had TV, when we had electricity, when we had a house, often you'd watch some commercials on the TV, and there'd be all these amazing toys being shown. And I'd be like, oh man, I want an AT-AT, or a Millennium Falcon, or I really want a Death Star. And then you go to school and everybody's talking about their toys that they have, because their moms and dads have bought them those toys that have been advertised. And suddenly, although my life had been without those toys a month before not hearing about them, now that I've heard about these toys, now somehow my life feels less complete. My life is no different than it was before I found out that I was lacking these toys. I didn't need the toys to survive. But after seeing the ads on TV and hearing about the joy that my classmates were receiving by having these toys, I suddenly felt more misery, more anger, more jealousness, right? I was jealous, I was angry. Not only just angry at the poverty I lived in, but angry at those others who had the toys and in my mind were less deserving of them. Why did they get them? Creates a lot of misery. It intensifies the misery. Because now I see it as not just a luxury, that's a necessity. I have to have that. How come everybody else has an Atari? I don't have an Atari. Wish I had an Atari. Right? And then they have like a Nintendo game. Once Once I get that, I'm like, man, I don't even have an Atari yet. Now you guys have moved on to Nintendo. Now you guys have moved on to cars and trucks. And I don't have a car or a truck. So each time you watch that multi-billion-dollar business that is advertising, they present some kind of dream, an American dream of consumerism. And they present it like your life is incomplete without these things. And advertising can be hidden sometimes. It's not as simple as just, oh man, I'm watching a hockey game and it's the ad that happens in between, play, right? And there's a shortage in play when the play is stopped, they go to the ads. It's not just that, there's hidden ads that are in the TV shows and the movies that we watch. There are hidden ads within the music we listen to. And it's often those hidden ads that did the most at creating misery, because it intensified the reality that many of these luxuries that I didn't have felt more like necessities. So that first sentence is suggesting that through advertising, our lives have actually become quite miserable, because there's always going to be newer versions of the things we're consuming. And it's not cost effective to keep up. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to find an ad. I ask you to simply find an ad online and show me an ad that you believe is presenting something that's really a luxury, but they're presenting it to you in a way that says, no, this is a necessity. That if you can get this Apple Watch, or if you can get this iPad, or if you can get this Lexus, or if you can get this timeshare in Boca Raton, or if you can get this trip to Italy, your life will be better. That your life is pretty incomplete without it. So in a moment, I want you to find an ad, and there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 13 of us here today. So I want you to try to find the most convincing ad of the 13. So you've got a 1 in 13 chance of winning this. So the next part of this sentence, the business world is bent on creating hungers, which its wares never satisfy. That's the key, is that through advertising, they're creating a hunger that we can never quite fulfill it. It's always like, man, I thought there'd be more. That's the whole point of capitalism, and that's the whole point of consumerism, is that it can't be a thirst that is easy to quench. Because if you can quench it, then we stop working, right? Then I retire. But it's a hunger that their wares can never satisfy. So I want you to consider that when you're looking for your product. The idea that maybe they're presenting, and it'd be great if you could do this, go back and find an ad for the iPhone 1 or the iPhone 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, and how they're like presenting it like it's life altering. And then the very next year they say, oh man, we got something better now, right? That's the idea, that their wares will never satisfy our hunger. And their wares will never satisfy our hunger because our hunger is for necessities, and their wares really aren't necessities. We're chasing the wrong stuff. This last part, though, is quite alarming. It adds to our frustrations and our broken minds. So we look at society today in 2020, psychologically. And a lot of people are broken. We have broken people. And this source is suggesting that we're broken because of consumerism. Because we're in a game that nobody can win. Because there's always going to be more. There's always going to be a better cup, more collectible cup. It's always going to be a faster car, a shinier car. And if we find enjoyment out of consumerism, we're never going to be completely fulfilled. So I'm going to stop that there, and I'm going to give you 10 minutes. So 1 o'clock's the deadline. I want you in those 10 minutes to try to find, in your minds, an advertisement that is most reflective of the spirit of this quote. That is trying to take something that's really a luxury and saying, you know what, no, this is a necessity for you guys. Now the ad could be a print ad. It's easy to find print ads online. But you can also find a short video. If it's a short video, then what I'd ask you to do is just create a link, like get the URL link, and send it on a document, share it with me, so we can all watch your ad. Because I think we can learn from each other here. So, you got 10 minutes, let's see what you come up with.